Yeah, Morena, I just want to start by saying that I totally support what the council is doing in terms of the focus on getting people to shift from private vehicle use into cycling. It's critical. It's got so many benefits, and well done on what feels like it's been a long time coming, but we've got a plan, and it feels like there's momentum. So that's really awesome. I guess my perspective on this is that I think that e-bikes are like iPhones, where there's a before and an after the mass adoption. And really, a lot of the thinking around cycling still seems to be this kind of dated, phones used to be things we pulled out of our pockets occasionally to talk to people. Now it's a different world. And so some of the data and design guides around cycling still seem to be this kind of old paradigm where people pootle around at slow speeds in nice flat places. And all respect to the Dutch, Netherlands, they fought hard, they've got this great service, but it's just not Wellington. And so I guess my take is that we need to be saying we're building for the future. The council already knows that about 50% of cyclists on some of the key routes at the moment are e-bikes. We know that the e-bikes are where we're getting women, we're getting older people, we're getting the kind of less traditional cyclists coming into cycling, which is amazing, it's awesome. We've got people carrying their kids. We've got people carrying multiple kids. We've got people jumping on their e-cargo bike and shooting down into town as grown-ups, and zipping back up the home, giggling and laughing. It's a different world. It's an awesome world. But the flip side is that if you have a person on a normal bike and you put them on an e-bike and you add 10 kilograms of extra bike weight, which is pretty typical, and just 10 kilograms of average speed, which again is pretty typical, their kinetic energy, or basically the bang that happens if something goes wrong, increases by a factor of almost 4. And we've got these kind of design guides where we say, oh, look, here are your beginner commuter riders, and we're designing for that and not designing for what can really be more like a 50cc motor scooter. So an adult riding an e-bike loaded up with a kid or two on the back will hit a car door or a bollard or a person in the same way that someone riding a motor scooter would. And I think that's my concern is we've got this great plan, we've got this network, we've got these kind of corridors, we know how many people we're going to potentially bring into this. But we, in Wellington, we have an injury rate which is going up faster than the participation rate. So one of the basic mantras of cycle advocacy is more bikes on the road is safer for everyone. And we don't have that in Wellington. So I just really want to try and sort of stress, and this is potentially where it becomes a technical question, and I'd love to have reassurance that this is all being taken care of, but a lot of the data is more than 10 years old. We look at these rates, I've looked at the NZTA guidelines and various things, and I guess my kind of arm waving is, this is all really awesome, but we need to do it for the future. If we're talking years in advance, then we're going to have people on bikes, and we need to understand what those people are going to be doing and how they're going to be riding, bikes they're carrying, and design for that, not some sort of happy picture that we've got from a place and a time which is not so relevant. So I guess I want to say I love it all. I just want it to be done for the future. So thank you. I will gladly give my time to other people if that's
awesome, Richard. Thank you for that. And I'm sure people have lots of questions for you. And just to the other public participants, just remember you can also ask questions or comment on other people's submissions at the end as well. So, but yeah, that was awesome, Richard. Thank you. So I don't think we have Kerry here. So I'm gonna pass it over to Emma to do your submission. So Emma, you've got 5 minutes, and looking forward to hearing what you have to share with us this morning.
Kia ora, ngā mihi nui ki a koutou katoa. My name's Emma. I live in Paikawakawa in Southern Ward, and so my perspective and submission is around the network as a whole, but particularly around the density of connections in Southern Ward. My perspective is as someone who rides a bike on the regular, who has a kid who sometimes comes on the back of my cargo bike and sometimes rides her own bike, and a lot of enthusiasm for making sure the network works for like all of those kinds of riding and all the kinds of riding in between. And also as someone who is involved in cycle advocacy and teaching cycling, who wants to make sure that the network works for children and adults who are just starting out cycling. I want to commend the council for the network plan that they've developed. It's really exciting to see that this is happening, and that it seems to have a wide and widening base of support, with people recognising that this plan will help us to meet our climate goals, and it will help us, if we do it right, to do in a way that's equitable, that's inclusive, that's going to bring a lot of people with us. I want to encourage the council to increase the density of connections, particularly in the Southern Ward. If we look at the proposed network, there are essentially kind of the Newtown Adelaide route and the Brooklyn route bracketing a bit of a desert of cycle lanes in comparison to other parts of the network. And particularly I want to note that the area is very hilly, and what's kind of maybe on paper like within 5 minutes of the network can in practice be a much more difficult ride, especially when those roads are carrying heavy volumes of traffic, carrying heavy vehicles, whether they're kind of like the SUV size ones or even up to the double-decker buses. So that in order to make sure that network actually works in the way it's designed, we need to increase the density of those kind of like smaller capillaries coming off those arterial cycle routes. And that's important for equity. It's important for making sure the cycle network actually works for young people who want to ride. So I really encourage the council to consider the location of schools in planning those networks. My idea would be that every school is connected into the network. Saying it's just a 5-minute gap to being on the network, we know doesn't work for children. They're actually a protected route going all the way to the front gate is what we need for that to be kind of safe for parents to feel confident with their children riding on those networks. If I look in my home area, I can see places where the council could, I believe, quite easily and cheaply increase the utility of the network. For example, by putting in connections through parts of the town belts like McAllister and Liardet Park. A connection through there to the main network would make the area where I live in Vogeltown and around Mornington would mean there's a protected route to get onto the network. And
Emma,
that
just
would,
1 minute remaining.
Thank you. And that would make the network feel a lot safer to use. So I thank the council for their work. I encourage the council to make sure it's not just like a 5-minute gap, but to take the route all the way to the local playground, take it all the way to the local school, use what we have to think about how we can protect the route and make sure it's not just paint on the road, but gives our children in particular a safe riding route around their neighbourhood. Thank you.
Kia ora, Emma, thank you for that. So next up we've got Zong, hopefully I'm pronouncing that properly, who you have 5 minutes to talk to us about your submission.
Zong, I'm afraid you're on mute as well.
Oh, okay, that's why I unmuted. Thanks, Councillor Hall. My name is Zong. I'm a cyclist. I ride everywhere. And because I rent, kind of lived in different parts of town as well, so I have general interest of all of the network for all of the in the near suburbs, like all the way from like Karori, Northland, Te Aroha, southern suburbs like Berempore, Newtown, and out east towards Hataitai, Mount Vic, Hataitai, and so on. Couple of ideas. The thing is, yes, the bike network plan is good. I support it. I think we need it. Please go ahead and do it. And so the first smaller point I want to bring up is exactly that, namely to do more things and talk about it less. So a great example of that is the Brooklyn, Brooklyn temporary lane. I really enjoyed it because it is it's not like, you can see that it wouldn't have cost a lot of money to build it, and it didn't take a lot of time. It didn't require a lot of consultation process, and it makes cycling that much safer. And I would imagine that it has already enabled and encouraged some people who live in Brooklyn that otherwise wouldn't have biked before to start trying the hand. That's great. And you can always change things as it goes. I'm aware that currently there is similar ideas going for Glenmore Street and for towards Newtown. So I am all on board. I think that is the most important thing, because if you build small things and it encourages cycling, then you would have more justification and more confidence to be like, well, if we build the bicycle lanes, indeed people will come. It's not just theory. Like, you can experiment and observe and convince yourself and convince your colleagues. So yeah, that's it. That's the one of the things. Just build it and they'll come. Do it and observe it and convince yourself. Apart from that, just probably a couple of minor points. One is that in terms of the network as a whole in general, especially in the dense sort of city center areas, maybe from Lambton to Te Aroha, Courtney, is I wanted to spend my time here reminding you all that places where there is currently the most amount of vehicular traffic and also most amount of vehicular, thinking of streets like Tory or Willis, maybe Cuba, is exactly where you should take out existing street side parking and put in protected separated cycle lanes. The reason for this is that the existing traffic is a reason for you to is evidence that these places are where people want to be. And because you can fit more people on bikes and in the same space and time through that space, if you change them into bicycle lanes, more people can get there. And so you increase the safety and you increase business, and you make the cityscape more pleasant. So yeah, so for encouraging more people to use climate-friendly transport and to make the city more enjoyable as a place to live and as a place to be, I'm really looking forward to the council doing more things and putting in bicycle lanes. Perhaps not at once, and I would like to see them gradually, but very soon. The first small thing really soon. Thank you.
Awesome, Zong. Thank you for that submission. And now we're moving on to potentially our final submitter for the morning. And oh no, Kerry has now joined us. But let's go to you first, Anthony, and then we'll get Kerry on at the end. So Anthony's here from Trails Wellington, and you've got 5 minutes to speak to your submission.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks and good morning. It's good to talk to you all again. And in terms of Trails Wellington, obviously you know us well, we're a charitable volunteer-based organisation. We're a coalition, people focused on creating epic trails in and around Wellington, working with groups like the Macro Peak supporters, the Brooklyn Trail Builders, the Wellington Mountain Bike Club, Revolve Women Riding, also Word, the kids riding group as well. So we really work across all of those organisations. I think we had a quick count up the other day and we've invested about $500,000 in the last 12 months into trail development and creation around the city. Our idea here is one that we've talked to the council before, which is we think there's a fantastic opportunity to complement the on-road cycling with informal off-road cycle networks. We call them informal because previously when the councils looked at this area, they way over-engineered what was needed, right down to lights and all sorts of things. Whereas here we're just talking about a decent wide piece of metal running through areas like what Emma highlighted, that you could hook up Berrinpore through to Central Park pretty easily and readily. And if you dig around in your different plans you've approved over the years, I think that trail has even conceptually been approved. So our message really is to get on and build those informal off-road cycle networks. We're working on our sort of master plan for the off-road trail network at the moment, and we'll include that inside it. But it's certainly an area that we'd be looking for council support and work on would be those types of trails. So, you know, examples, as we've said, would be running through McAllister Park, Prince of Wales Park into Central Park. Again, that's already been planned. Equally, if you're bold, you'd look at areas like Trelissick Park, out to the western suburbs, up through into Karori even. Equally, you've got Prince Albert right along the spine of Mount Victoria and into the city there. All easy to do, low cost, takes the cyclist off the road. Equally, doesn't create that whole tension and issue around removing parking spaces off people. It's really easy to implement. And the big thing for me is really it would create a multi-recreationalist asset. You know, we're talking about something people could run on, walk on, kids can ride on. It fills a hole that we talk to the council all the time within the trail network being very much low-level, entry-level riding. So, you know, and there's all those things, as Richard talked about, you know, the advent of e-bikes, they just will eat trails like that, perfectly designed. It would be really easy and really quick to commute across the city in those informal trail networks, even on lower grade trails, in fact. And so really, that's an area we want to work and partner with the council on. To me, it's just political will. Everyone we talk to always says, what a great idea. And yet no one really is willing to be the sponsor and supporter. So our challenge to the councillors is we think, you know, one or many of the councillors should put your hand up and say, yep, we're willing to sponsor this and actually drive it and make it happen. Again, we don't see it as a massive burden on the ratepayers. And so certainly something we want to work with on the council. What did I miss, Matt? He's on mute, so he's quickly unmuting himself. Nothing.
Yeah, there I am. Hey, no, I think that covers it all. Yeah, and look, we know Liam, who's head of council planning, is. We've had discussions with him, and there seems to be some keenness on his part to explore this further. And you know, and part of the challenge is that the Waka Kotahi guidelines, you know, talk about the grey roads being the commuting laneways that to be worked on, and we want to build in the green effectively, and Waka Kotahi haven't got their head around that yet. So we're keen to work with the council and Waka Kotahi to try and find a solution there, which doesn't involve having to put concrete through, you know, public spaces, open green land, and trying to put lights and things like that, which we think were suitable for 20 years ago, but not now with, you know, the amount of lighting on bikes and as Anthony said, the onset of e-bikes and things like that.
Thanks.
It's almost like
minutes.
Yeah, it's almost like what Zong said. It's almost like you just freaking do it, and it's you make it as easy or as hard as you want to. You just line up and go, let's just make sure there's a path through that area that people can start using and get into it.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks, Anthony and Matt. Looking forward to continuing this chat soon. So now we've got Kiri. Welcome, Kiri. You've got 5 minutes to speak to us about the Paneke Pōneke bike network plan and your submission, and then we'll have questions and discussion at the end after you.
Kia ora, thank you for inviting me, and apologies for being late joining. I'm just actually unpacking because I'm temporarily relocating in the Taranaki while my daughter has a baby. but I normally live in Island Bay. I'm a teacher normally, and I've taught at Wellington High School and Wellington College. And at both of those places, I've been disappointed at the number of students who would consider riding to school. And it's not the students, I think mostly it's the parents who'd be very worried about cycling to either of those places. There's so many issues. The classic one is, of course, if you come down Adelaide Road to Wellington College from Island Bay, you're going to go all the way around the basin, or what are you going to do? Or do you people just go across the pavement, or they go opposite on the one way, just crossing the road and cut through. And it's little things like that, like previous speakers have said, which make it so that people don't feel comfortable going in riding in different places. They either kind of got to be in the gung-ho crazy cyclist category, or they stay safe and they just get a lift with their parents or catch the bus. And it's just such a pity. There is, and I really would like to encourage the council to just go for it, and not like, I'm so chuffed that there's so many other speakers saying the same thing. Don't spend millions and millions making a super duper cycleway in one place. Just go for the simple but effective, you know, a few lines in the road, a few little bollards and things like that can just make such a huge difference. Also, living in Island Bay, I do get the hate mail. I just got a flyer the other day saying the council is going to take away more than half of the car parking spaces along the parade. This is outrageous, and it's going to ruin local businesses. And it's just this small minority of people. The vast majority of people don't use bikes much because of the safety issues, and they will still drive to a gym to go on an exercise bike, which I just think for the climate is a great tragedy. So yeah, I encourage you to go for the simple solutions. Sometimes it's even just a question of cutting back the flax at the side of the road or something, so there is room for a bike to go through where things are getting overgrown. I had that issue one time trying to go to Pōneke, and then things were so overgrown you couldn't get at the side of the road. But sometimes obviously it does involve taking out a few car parking spaces. But kia kaha, Wellington City Council. That's my submission.
Kia ora, Kerry. Thank you so much for that. So we have got just under 20 minutes left to have a bit of a kōrero all together. So I guess I would invite our councillors to ask questions of any of our submitters. So we've got Councillor Rebecca Matthews with the first partai.
First of all, just want to say thank you. This might be my favourite group ever, but I guess I'm interested in what Richard was saying about, you know, the design needing to adapt for e-bikes, and I'm wondering if any of the participants, but maybe you first, Richard, have got some ideas about what those key differences might be, because I guess I don't have a good understanding of that. You know, what would make it so different in how we do things?
So I guess I'm one of those like category 4 crazy cyclists. I've got my heart rate monitor on. I know, you know, been out for a ride this morning. I'm one of those guys. So my partner has started e-biking. She actually probably clocks up more Ks at the moment than I do. So I'm basically going to talk about her journey, and I didn't make her. It was because her friends got e-bikes, and we're going, this is amazing. And the buses, you know, because it was taking her 45 minutes plus 30 minutes sometimes to get to work. So e-bikes basically made her shift. So she was either busing or doing a combination driving and walking. About 45-minute travel time. It was before we lived together. I was getting a daily text message going 23 minutes, 22 minutes, 19 minutes. She's down to 14 minutes. That's the current record. And then the getting home was, you know, 22 minutes. So she is what we want in the world. She is now an advocate. More of her friends should go, try my bike. oh yeah, go this, I'm going to shoot down to town, I'm going to go to this bar, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And so it's this kind of, you know, I'm old and cynical and jaded and take abuse as it comes, but I've got this kind of new appreciation. So she is also engaged with Cycle Wellington, and she writes to the council, and she, you know, so the e-bikes are this total change where there are all these people, but then, like Emma was saying, 5 minutes sounds like 5 minutes. You go, what's 5 minutes on your bike ride? But if that 5 minutes is terrifying, or if that 5 minutes is where you know you're going to hit that bus coming around that blind corner, then it's an on-off. And a couple of scares like that mean that you lose that rider, and it may take them a long time and a lot of convincing, and then they become one of those kind of losses that we should be, you know, desperately trying to avoid. Alongside what Emma was saying, like a little bit of loose gravel, a little bit of bumps. So many people now have bikes, you know, Anthony was saying this too, that are capable of doing that. E-bikes mean that a nicer, longer journey is now possible. So if there's a nice trail through Mount Vic where you're off the road and you're in the trees, that may only add a few minutes to that horrible Adelaide Road Basin Reserve, you know, kind of death run, as it tends to get called. So I think there's this kind of massive opportunity, but I'm also concerned, you know, a friend and I, both very experienced cyclists, we were looking at the Island Bay Cycleway, we were working there. We worked out, we measured some vehicles, the average door opening would not leave enough room for an average bike handlebar to get past without hitting the curb. And you will typically now be traveling at, say, 30 kilometers an hour. So we kind of worked out, you've got no time. Neither of us could avoid a collision with that door. And so that's my concern, is that we've got these people who are going, you know, they say the e-bikes smile, and you talk to shops, they sell themselves. People go out on them, they love them. They go into traffic, and then that's when you can kind of lose that joy and that all the advantages. So I guess maybe it's just a technical question of how quickly we are evolving what we're doing, and also, you know, whether if you're in 30 kilometre an hour traffic, do we need to separate out one 30 kilometre an hour vehicle from another? You know, I know Jane, my partner, says the Victoria Street Cycleway is the worst part of her journey, because you're crossing and changing, and there are cars and flipping. If she was just in the middle of the road with all the traffic, she would be fine. But because there's a cycleway, you get yelled at if you're not on it, even if it's blocked. So, I'm kind of ranting a bit, but there's kind of all the upside, which is almost ours to lose, if that makes sense.
Ka pai. Thanks, Richard. Now we're going to move on to Councillor Jill Day's question.
Kia ora. Thank you so much, Will, for sharing your whakaaro with us. It's really encouraging, and I think Councillor Matthews might be right. This is a very unique group of people who are well informed and experienced in this. I guess one of the things that we're hearing from our community, and I think it's heard all over Wellington, is that can you just take the bike lane in another part of the community? You know, don't put it through the businesses. We don't want to lose the parking. And I feel like the businesses at the moment still don't really understand the opportunities that could be lost by doing that. I mean, personally, when I'm cycling, I'm more likely to stop and go into a shop than when I'm in my car. But it's like at this point, we haven't reached critical mass where that's going to make a difference for those businesses. And Emma, I think you had some interesting thoughts about how to, you know, the connections, those short connections, and what that means for cyclists. I'd be interested to hear what you think about how we support, I guess, businesses to understand that this network is actually really important, and if they can work constructively, then they can benefit.
That's a really interesting point, Jill, and we know looking internationally, business associations have really come around, I believe in Vancouver, for example, on the value of the cycle network for business. And we know also that businesses have a tendency to overestimate the number of people who do travel into areas like town by car. Cycle Action Network did some advocacy around, or Cycle Wellington did some advocacy around this in relation to pedestrianising the Golden Mile, asking people how they actually got into town, and finding that public transport and active transport make up for kind of a larger but underestimated section of how people travel. At the same time, I want to acknowledge kind of the submissions, I don't know if in relation to this one, but of Disabled Persons Assembly who have kind of raised concerns around accessibility. I think there is scope for the council to really proactively look at that hierarchy of transport, and where there is parking, to think very carefully about how that parking is allocated, giving greater priority to disabled parking, greater priority to very short-term, like 10-minute loading zones, over kind of extended on-road parking. Like, in many ways, this is like a question of how do we redistribute parking in a way that is fairer and in a way that actually serves the needs of the people who are using that space the most and who have fewer options for switching modes. But I think what many of us envisage is a city where people have genuine choice and convenient, affordable choices of how they get around their city. And I know, particularly in COVID times, I know Councillor Matthews has raised the issue of actually more people are spending time in their local suburban area, and there are upsides in kind of what we might call the 15-minute city, of being able to get to your local amenities, which an integrated cycling network where people can get around their local area rather than just, you know, drive to the mall kind of type of place will really support.
Thank you.
Thanks, that was awesome. Councillor Sean Rush, do you have any partai or questions for any of our submitters?
Yeah, so Richard, I'm a bit like you. I mean, I've cycled all my life since I was 6, and I'm pretty comfortable in most sorts of traffic. And I guess I just question, I suppose, at what point do you say, look, we've done our best here, but, you know, if you're still feeling unsafe, you know, it's probably time to start thinking about catching a bus or walking, which is certainly times I've had to admit that as well.
Yeah, and you know, there's issues of the reality of how much money there is and how you spread that around, and equity issues, like, you know, it's just staggeringly distressing, the reality of how hard it is to do stuff and how much stuff costs. You know, the Brooklyn Cycleway with a kind of budget was thrown around $300,000, which is really, you know, some paint, rubber and some bollards, just seems unbelievable. And there is a point where you do sort of say, well, you know, how much does one person's desire to cycle conflict with another person's desire to be able to get out of their car, you know, in a close car park and so forth. So I think that is a question to some extent we don't have to answer, because petrol prices are not coming down. We are not going to have this, you know, big vehicle abundancy anymore. People are going to howl and scream, but at the end of the day, we're going to shift, right? Some of these things we don't, to some extent, have to argue about for very long before external factors are going to drive us. So I get really conflicted. I love when the council does stuff. I hate the division. I live in Brooklyn, so I've got maybe not exactly friends, but people I've known for more than a decade who end up on the other side of these bitter Facebook flame wars with, you know, accusations of this and that and demands and it's kind of ridiculous that something that should be so simple and to some extent so inevitable becomes such a big deal. And so I will be the first to put my hand up and say, yeah, there needs to be a limit to how much cycling is forced or supported. But I think we're so far behind any reasonable support that we don't need to argue about when we stop, because we're nowhere near that line, you know.
Okay. Can I just touch on?
Sure. Hey, Sean,
Sorry.
could we just? I think maybe Zong and Emma also want to respond. So can we just give them an opportunity to share what they think as well?
I guess I go first. Some minor points that Rich brought. There's this narrative saying that we build, we as a city, we want to build cycle lanes, and who is going to use them? Do you even have that many cyclists? And like, are we building for the few? Or are we building for the many? Blah, blah, blah. I just wanted to bring up the point that we are exactly building for the few, because we want the few to be not so few. The whole point is to enable people who are not cyclists to become cyclists. So really, building for few should not be a showstopper. And it sounds controversial. It's really not. Like, the whole point is to get people to change the way they travel. People who already ride bikes, they ride, anyway. I guess another random minor point is with removing parking. Some people need to park, like disabled and so on. And so the more you get people to ride bikes, the less parking demand there is, and the more that people who actually need to park will get to park in the shops or loading zones. Yeah, I yield my time to Emma.
Thanks, Zong. Going back to the scenario that Councillor Rush raised of someone feeling unsafe, we've got to ask why they're feeling unsafe. And that, like, roads are lovely surfaces to ride on. They're wide, they're well maintained. The thing that makes them feel unsafe is other vehicles on the road. So I encourage the council to look at its full toolkit for making roads safer to ride on. For instance, lowering the speed limit lowers the risk of riding with traffic, and there's much less danger in a 30k zone than in a 50k zone. The council may also look at low traffic neighbourhoods, which is where councils kind of block off ends of roads so that pedestrians and cyclists can get through those neighbourhoods. Everyone can get to everywhere by vehicle in the neighbourhood, but they can't use it as a commuter pathway. And that lowers traffic volumes and makes more areas safe to ride in. So I encourage the council to consider that if people are feeling unsafe on the road, it's not our cyclists or our roads that are necessarily the problem there. We can look at how do we reduce that threat, because that threat is coming from sharing the road with heavy, fast moving vehicles generally.
Awesome, thanks, Emma. And just Anthony, did you have anything you wanted to just add on to that? No worries if not. Just trying to make sure everyone gets a bit of time. Okay, cool. And Zong, you wanted to?
Another small point, which is on safety. Everyone deserves to be safe. Just because I'm not in the car or I'm not taking public transport, I deserve to be safe, even if I choose to ride a bike for whatever reason, whoever I am. So it's not like, like I feel safe and therefore I bike. If I'm safe, you can go to want. Sometimes I don't have a choice. Like, maybe I can't afford to drive. Maybe I don't have a license. Maybe I don't live near a bus network. Maybe the timetable is too tight, doesn't work for me. I need to have these choices, and I deserve to be safe. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Zong. Thank you. Councillor Matthews, we've got a couple of minutes left if you wanted to ask a quick partai.
Well, does Kerry want to speak first before I do?
Can't see your hand up.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I just wanted to add to Zong's safety thing. I think one of the things that is often complained about with cyclists is that they're on footpaths, they're on footways and on pavements, knocking down pedestrians. And of course, that's because those cyclists don't feel safe on the roads. So the whole safety argument goes as more as we can get those scared cyclists into cycleways, that makes the footways safer for pedestrians as well. Because those scared cyclists aren't then frightening pedestrians, which is a bit of a tragedy. Okay, that's my point.
Awesome. Anthony, did you have any final things in this last few minutes that you might want to share that we haven't covered?
My question was actually for Anthony.
Oh, sorry, I thought that was your point before. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And so I guess I just wanted to find out what you think is the biggest barrier to us doing things in the way that you described, like kind of using those kind of easy wins to have use the green as I think Matt said. Yeah, what's the biggest barrier?
I think just political will to do it. It's just the desire and sort of motivation, someone taking the lead on it. Rebecca, it's that simple. Like I said, it needs, I've talked to both the mayor and the chief executive, it needs somebody within the council with power, like councillors or key people, just have a political will and desire to get it done and say, okay, I'll sponsor this and work with groups like ourselves. Whereas, it's like, as I said, as Zong said, it's just a matter of getting out there and just doing it. It's, yeah, so that's simple, really, Rebecca.
2 months ago.
We don't feel we lack political will, but that's good challenge.
And to be fair, Rebecca, because we've had a lot on this year, we haven't prioritised it. So we've been so busy beating on your door on a number of other fronts. Yeah. That's why our master plan is important in this, because we'll draw those on as like tube line type picture, as London Underground, I mean, and we'll come to you and say, is there political will to do it? And there will always be broken eggs. Like if you suddenly say, there actually is a formed tar seal track right the way through, that's car width, all the way through the bottom of Otari, running in the stream bed. It's there because there's a huge pipe underneath it, and when they laid the pipe, they put tar seal on it, and that sort of thing. That's what I'm talking about. Is someone just comes on and says, okay, from now on, you can ride to Karori from the city up through Trelisic Park. There is a small barrier of going under the railway line, but again, it's just a hole. Someone digs. No doubt New Zealand Rail will have a view on that, because they're always a bit precious when you get close to their stuff. But yeah, it's as simple as that. And sorry, I'll pick the challenging one. The obvious ones are the Mount Albert, Mount Victoria, or the Berhampore through to Central Park. And the Berhampore Central Park thing is actually planned. It's there. It's just a matter of someone saying, okay, get the shovel out and do it. Sorry, long answer.
Were you wanting to chip in, Matt?
Oh yeah, I would only just add, that I don't know how much of an issue it is with Waka Kotahi, and how much of their funding is dependent on things being on the grey. I just that little issue seemed to come up a few times, and it would certainly be good to understand, if that's moved, or whether the council's working with them around that, because that was something we'd like to explore.
Yeah. But you're also talking, though, Matt, in the big scheme of things, we're not talking about huge spend.
Well, but if Waka Kotahi money is being needed for this, and I don't know which channel it comes through, whether it's Get Wellington Moving or directly for something like this, and they're saying, well, we're only going to fund grey, then that is a problem.
Yeah. Well, Councillor Sean, I can see you have a question, but I think we need to let our officers go and have a little lunch break before our next session. So I just really wanted to thank all of our participants here this morning for coming and having a kōrero with us. I loved all the different perspectives. I think you all brought unique perspectives and views on Paneke Pōneke. So thank you so much for your time and coming and having a chat with us. We're all really grateful for you. So to everyone else, we'll be back on this Zoom link at 12:30 to be kicking off with the next groups of submitters. So hope everyone has a nice lunch and stay cool out there. It's very muggy. Keen to hear from you today about your perspectives and your thoughts and feelings about where we're going with this plan. So the way that these forums work, everybody gets 5 minutes each to speak to the plan, to their submission. And after that, we will have some time left over at the end for a bit of interaction and discussion between councillors and you lovely submitters who have come to talk to us today. So we're going to start off with David, and then we'll go to Michelle after that. So thank you so much for giving us your time this afternoon, and we're looking forward to hearing what you have to share. So over to you, David, for 5 minutes, and this is being recorded as well.
Top of the afternoon, Lady Chair and fellow participants. Okay, so a wee bit of background. My name's Dave Puttyfat. I'm nearer 70 than 50. Rode a bike all my life. Done a lot of biking around Auckland, to be honest. And when I was up there, I put submissions in for the Western Motorway, the tunnel, and also lately from the Ola Road. So when I saw this one come along, it wasn't so much that I have a particular interest in that area because I live in Johnsonville, but it was more just around supporting the whole concept of the council continuing to build cycleways. As we all know, e-bikes have had their uplift in demand for cycleways. It's a lifelong from kids to old age, so that I think it's an important part of it, and that's my personal need. But the council's needs around reducing emissions, fewer vehicles on the road, and of course bikes substitute for vehicles, but maybe they take up less space, and also the one about action against climate change. I think also there's the lifestyle fitness from the personal point of view. So that's my background, and I really just totally support continuing cycleways. Probably it does surprise me a little bit at the cost of creating a cycleway, considering it's a non-motorised form. And I know we're trying to put a cycleway over the top of existing pedestrian stroke roads, and I guess you guys are sorting it out. But I just look at the one down the bottom of the Rongotai of the airport there, and I thought, gee, well, it takes a hell of a lot of effort to put one in. I've also looked at the one in Dunedin there around the harbour. Yeah, a lot of effort. So I appreciate it does take ratepayer dollars to put this in. The other thing is I encourage the council simply because it's a change in how we live our lives, and there's good reasons why we need to change. So I encourage the council being brave and, like it is now, taking initiatives. In other words, you know, people probably don't know what they need, so good on the council. Set it up and it will evolve from there. As to the specific cycleway, the plan A, B, C, D, E, and I'm just going back, I think it's around Lyle Bay, wasn't it? I don't have a particular knowledge on that, so I won't try to impose other than to encourage it. Did I see down that way you've tried parking in the middle of the road and cycle in a safer place? I know, once again, you come up a lot of opposition with people saying, well, that's too hard, it's too big a change, but I commend the council for trying these different proposals. I don't think we can listen too much to the naysayers, otherwise a good idea will get lost again. So, yep, gently keep cycles going. I represent a lot of e-bikers nowadays, and I think we're right behind it. And I think it is important when you were looking at those different alternatives down on the bay there, that the connecting the high population places, that's a bit of a debate, isn't it? Do you want to connect high population places, or do you want to connect places where people can go cycling? I'm up for both, obviously. There needs to be a little bit of cycle etiquette around riding with pedestrians, or even scooters for that matter. And I'm going to include scooters and cyclists in the same group. We're a modern bunch, probably leading the way. So that's probably enough. I'm interested in the general discussion too, so I'll stop there. Thank you.
Kia ora, David. Thank you for that. And thanks for joining us at this session. So next we're moving on to Michelle. Kia ora, Michelle. You've got 5 minutes to speak to the plan and to your submission. Just need to unmute there, Michelle.
forgot it was on mute. Apologies, the wind's been howling in my office, so I was worried you'd be getting a sort of a whistling sound if I left it off mute. Kia ora koutou, Michelle Rush. I am a resident of Niall and have been there now for, I reckon it's getting on towards 30 years. I'm a regular cyclist. I went away from cycling when I had little kids and was probably doing most of my commuting via car because I worked odd hours and public transport didn't work. Then I got an e-bike and it went from 80% car to 80% bike. I really commend the council on the cycling plan, and I am very strongly of the view that we really need this mode shift. My interests are public health, and particularly things like the obesity epidemic, mental health crisis. And I know from looking at endless research overseas, and it's not rocket science, we all know that when you're fitter and you're getting outside, it has huge benefits for your health and also your mental health. And I am also terribly worried about, the environmental issues facing this planet, and being aware of just how much of Wellington's carbon footprint is made up of car use. E-cars only partially fix that, but what they do not do in Wellington is fix our massive congestion issue, which will stay forever. We are a tight city. And so I really do think that this plus increased frequency and ability of public transport to be there for people is a crucial part of the solution, plus obviously better facilities for walking. So the thing I'd just like to emphasise is decide and provide, and in deciding, give people a lot of warning. I'm aware that a number of these routes are on very tight streets, and they are on streets where people currently park their cars for free, using the public resource for their garaging. That's going to cause angst when we remind people that this is actually a public resource and you don't have a God-given right to park your car, or in my case, your two cars outside on the street. And I'm welcoming the time when it becomes very difficult for me to park my car on said street, because I do believe that making things harder for people helps them choose an easier option. So we need to make sure active transport's easier. So the final question I've got, I guess, is where we can't in this space constrained city actually put in separate cycle infrastructure because we are just so damn tight and there's a cliff on one side and a gully on the other, which is a lot of the streets around my place. Consider creating streets where cars are guests, so that we actually take the speeds way down, way down. People creep along in their cars to get back to their house, but they certainly don't motor along them at 50, careening around things. I think that'll be part of a solution that could be affordable and easier to achieve than extremely expensive infrastructure. Secondly, is think about this as the whole. Think about perhaps using the Healthy Streets framework, where we can create really lovely streets with other things, not just a cycle path and a road. So in thinking about Thornton Quay, opportunities to green, to make parklets, places to sit, places to interpret, I don't know, historic areas or Māori cultural areas, thinking about that as the whole. And that's all I'd like to say. I just want to thank you all again for the opportunity to present to you.
Kia ora, Michelle, thank you for that. So next we're actually going to go to Zara so that you can have a kōrero to us before 2 o'clock, and then after Zara we'll go to Tony. Awesome. Kia ora, Zara, you've got 5 minutes to speak to the plan or to your submission. Oh, just having a little bit of trouble hearing you.
How about now?
Awesome, perfect.
Cool. Yeah, no, I really appreciate being asked to come and speak to my submission. I was kind of umming and ahhing whether to do it, and I thought actually, we all live in this city, we should all come and talk about our experience. So yeah, I just had a couple of points. So one thing was about semantics. We're talking about bike network plan, and I thought the overall plan looked really good and it was really wide reaching, but then actually what constitutes a bike path I think is really important, because I've seen some of the bike paths that have been put up around town, and I wouldn't feel safe riding on them. So I think, you know, it's all good and well to say, yeah, we're going to put a bike path here, but are people actually going to use them if they're not safe? I mean, I've seen some of the ones in, I think it was around Brooklyn, we've got the bike path and then it just cuts off and then you're just on the road again. And it's like, well, what's the point in that, really? And then especially, I think the ultimate goal for the bike path should be that children can use them and children feel safe using them, because if children can use them, then everyone will feel safe using them. And I don't really see that in our bike paths we currently have, aside from maybe the ones around the waterfront and Evans Bay. So I think that's something we really need to get right, is what constitutes a bike path, because I have been overseas in the Netherlands and you see that the bike path is on the same level as the footpath, and so there's sort of a drop down when you get to the road. So the bike, you're not actually biking on the road, and I think that's quite important too, if there's some sort of a better differentiation between the bike path and the road. So yeah, that was one. And also I think it's important that to not just have a bike path going one way up the street, because you're going to want to get home as well, so it needs to go the other way. And I've seen a lot of bike paths around Wellington that it's just going one way, and it's, yeah, I don't think it's enough. And yeah, I had those few examples. I was going to talk about personally for me, because I've just moved, but I was living at the top of Ngaya Gorge Road for 2 years, and I've seen that there's a proposed bike path up that street, but I mean, it's a really steep street, so you're going to need a good amount of room for the bike path, and it needs to go up and down, because people currently use the street to bike up there, but it's not safe at all. And when you've got a car coming down and a bus going up, the bus has to wait or else it would hit the cyclist. And so yeah, I'm keen to see what happens with that. And it's also interesting too, because they've been stabilizing the gorge there for the whole time I've been there, and they're putting in a new road, but they're not putting in any sort of bike path, it doesn't look like. So I think, you know, if you're going to do the work there for 2 years or however long it's been, why not actually put a bike path in while you're there? So was that. And then I had a point about, I think we need, if we're going to increase the bike infrastructure, then we need more bike racks on buses, because there's only 2 on there. And so if you had people living up a steep street that they wanted to bike into work but didn't want to bike home, then you'd need more than 2 bike racks on there. The trains are pretty good because you can get your bike on there, but not really the buses. And then I had a couple thoughts about law reform, because I know in the Netherlands that in terms of, you know, if you're a cyclist and there's some sort of accident with the car, it's always the car's fault. And so there's just this precedent that it's, you know, it's the car's fault. If there's a collision with a pedestrian and a bike, then it's always the bike's fault. And I think this helps to change the rhetoric around, you know, people being negative about people biking on the roads and that, if they had more onus on whose fault it was.
Zara, just half a minute remaining.
Thanks. And then I had a point about the parking in town. So I think it's fine if you want to raise the parking prices and that to incentivize active or public transport. But if you're not actually backing it up straight away with the infrastructure that people need to use active and public transport, then you're mainly just targeting people who can't afford to pay for the parking. So that's my last point. Thank you.
Oh, kia ora, Zara. Thank you for that submission. Hopefully you can stick around for the discussion at the end, because there's lots there to unpack, and so that was awesome. Thank you, Zara. So next we are going to go to Tony Randall, who I can't see on my screen. Oh, here we go. Yep. Kia ora, Tony. You've got 5 minutes to speak to the plan.
So thank you very much. I've got a PowerPoint I want to use, so it's okay, I'll share the screen. Okay, so I'll skip through it. It's a bit of a long one, but it has the main points written down for us. So, Johnsonville has 3 cycleways, a shared one on Moorfield Road and some side street ones on Broderick and Johnsonville roads. This is the bike path along Moorfield Road, and when it was put in 2014, I was on the reference group. The City Council explained this is the primary bike path for Johnsonville. Now we have this bit of information from the bike plan, and it shows that the primary bike path is now going to go along Johnsonville Road. So the key questions is, is it in the right place? Is it the right type? What's the impact? And why has the stuff got to be sorted out now? So our points, and there are other submitters also putting the same information to the council, is that a cycleway on Johnsonville Road doesn't actually join our community together. But Moorfield Road cycleway does, and it's showing the schools, and so it's obviously people who want to go to, especially the Onslow College and our intermediate, which are more the age of kids that would say, which can be trusted to cycle. They're down here, and the cycleway on Moorfield Road obviously provides access to the whole suburb. One along Johnsonville Road doesn't; it just leads to the steep Noronga Gorge. And also, Moorfield Road is access to our main public transport hub. It avoids having cyclists cross the very busy and unsafe Johnsonville roundabout. I mean, this roundabout's so unsafe that just late last year, the City Council ran a community survey asking for feedback about how they can actually make it safer. In addition, it provides a safer access to CBD, which is via Burma Road and Nye Gorge. Now, I know we just said Nye Gorge is unsafe. It's, comparing it to Noronga Gorge, at least it's a 50k road, but there's also a better opportunity, I think, for a good cycleway down Nye Gorge. And of course, Johnsonville Road will lead to the loss of many street parking for many Johnsonville retail businesses. Johnsonville Road is our main street. So what sort of plan will what sort of bike path, cycleway will it put in? Well, Johnsonville Road is right at the top of the scale when it comes to traffic, and that means we are looking at a protected cycleway. Is it wide enough for a protected cycleway? Well, yes, but only if street parking is removed along the whole length of the road. And obviously this will have a big impact on the residents accessing the shops. I think it's important also to note how important cycling is in Johnsonville. This is from the 2018 census. I'll just blow up the cycling one because it is, pretty small, even in the city, but it's quite clear that Johnsonville is a place with least cycling in most places. It's not unexpected because we're 10k out of the city and 150 meters up a steep hill. So it's not the easiest place to cycle from. And so that means, there's a question around cycleways in our suburb because, of course, there are fewer cyclists, so there's fewer beneficiaries.
1 minute remaining.
So I might need a little bit more time if that's okay. Jennifer?
We're just going to give everyone the same amount of time just so that everyone can be heard, and then at the end we might have some more specific questions for you.
Okay. Normally you would give an association, a group, a little more time than an individual.
Yeah, the forums are just set up a bit differently. We've just given everyone 5 minutes, organisations and individuals. But you've got about I think it's a minute or half a minute left to just finish and wrap up the slideshow.
Okay, I'll skip along to the main point. And that is, it seems the bike plan, has a traffic resolution, which essentially seems to say that the City Council plans to ask for the authority to build a cycleway without further public consultation, including removal. So our key points are that we want to focus on Moorfield Road as the primary cycling route, that we want to remove Johnsonville Road as either a primary or a secondary bike path in the bike plan, and we wish to remove all roads in Johnsonville from the traffic resolution so Johnsonville residents and businesses can be sure we'll be consulted on any future plan before it's built. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Tony. Awesome. Cool. So going to pass it over to Gary. You've got 5 minutes to speak.
Can you guys hear me all right? I'm getting messages saying that I haven't got a good connection, but can you hear me okay? All right, very good. Let's make a start. Look, thank you for the opportunity to present, just to speak to our submission. I'm taking it that you've all had an opportunity to read through the Karori Business Association submission. So I really just want to highlight a few points on that. And I just want to say, just to point out, particularly to David who presented before, just that the Business Association is definitely not a naysayer, but we're presenting a viewpoint that is sometimes overlooked. And I wanted to start with one of the statements I had in our submission, that cycleways definitely have their place, but establishing them on a main arterial route is not the right way, in our belief, to encourage mode shift, especially when it threatens to destroy the livelihood of local businesses. And I want to just take you to Marsden Village as an example just to begin with. There are very, very few options for off-street parking in Marsden Village. There's a few side streets that are generally taken up by staff and residential properties. There is the Marsden Village car park, the shoppers car park at the back of Marsden Books and the group of businesses on the left-hand side of Karori Road. However, there's a growing number of apartments being established in and around Marsden Village. And the indications that we have from the developers and from the property owners is that car park may not be long-term, medium or long-term available for shoppers car parks. It is at the moment, but there is definitely a threat that is not going to be the case going forward. So we've got an issue where are the people that do arrive in Marsden Village by vehicle going to park, and how are they going to access the buildings or the businesses, sorry. And we went to all of our members and we said that the Cycleway Network consultation was underway. We wanted some feedback from the businesses about what they thought. And we particularly had feedback from the Foursquare in Marsden Village, from the Unichem pharmacy there, from Florence Boutique, and others. And some of the points that they made was that a number of them deal with or have elderly or disabled customers who just are not able to park their vehicles too far away and walk up to the shops, or they're popping into the pharmacy to get boxes of medicines, which often the staff there have to carry out for them. So that ability for them to be able to pull in just for a few minutes, and there's quite good turnover of spaces along that part of Karori Road, is very, very valuable. We had Florence Boutique provided us with some stats about where their customers came from. So they, for a period of time, over 3 or 4 days, they asked all their customers, where do you come from? How did you get here? And indicated sort of, whether they were Karori based or outside the area. So those stats are in there, and they show that the vast majority come by car. Some of them walked, some of them used, in fact, none of them said they came by cycleway. That's not to say that cycleways don't have a place to play or role to play, but in this instance, the particular unique aspect of a number of the businesses in Marsden Village, as an example, mean that they attract people from far and wide out of the Karori area, people that cannot catch public transport or bike, people. So we've got an issue in Marsden Village, where are these guys going to park? That's one thing. The other concern we had was from the Karori Bridge Club, who again expressed a bit of concern on behalf of their members, where they've got a lot of drop-off area outside the Bridge Club there. A lot of their members are older, and require that ability to either park very closely or to be able to be dropped off. So they had some concern around if cycle lanes were suddenly established on Karori Road, how that would affect the operation of their organisation. I do want to just refer back to Wellington City Council did a parking occupancy and duration study in Karori in June last year, and they counted 49 on-street car parks. So, you know, the assumption is, well, 49 is not a huge number, but it did not cover Marsden Village. So how can you look at a complete overview of the parking situation and what the impact would be if you don't count half the area? So we had a bit of a concern that happened, but really highlighting the fact that for Marsden Village in particular, that off-street parking in the shoppers car park is under threat and may not always be there. And I will just point out, seeing as I see that His Worship the Mayor is on board, hi Andy, and this I take from Barry Keenan, who provided this information, but a number of years ago, when they were looking at introducing bus lanes along Karori Road, the issue was around the shops on the eastern side of the road, and data was provided to show that in an afternoon peak, that was the time when between 18 and 31% of the business was done for the businesses on that eastern side of the road. And Fran Wild, who was obviously chair of the Greater Wellington Regional Council back then, had indicated that no one had ever provided that sort of data. And she, as I understand it, went on to go and meet with the businesses in Marsden Village to explain the council's plans back then. And she stated that back then, because of that evidence, there would be no bus lanes. And I do have a comment here, I don't know how true it is, but I'll read it. But at the time, both Councillor Foster and Wolf, who were the ward councillors at the time, also agreed that putting in a cycle lane or a bus lane through that side of Karori Road simply should not and could not be done. Now,
thank you, Gary. Sorry, just to let you know that you've run slightly over time there.
Well, this is important, and I'm going to finish what I'm saying now with simply just saying that we're offering a different perspective, which is the livelihood of businesses must be considered when you pull together this sort of plan. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Gary. Okay, and then to our last submitter for this session, we've got Isabel. Kia ora, Isabel, you've got 5 minutes to speak to your submission and to the plan.
Kia ora, Tamantha. Hi, I don't think I'll really take 5 minutes. I don't have too much more to say, too much more to add than the first couple of submitters really, which was just generally Kapai love bikes. I suppose when I submitted on this plan, I had not yet purchased an e-bike. So I've been a cyclist for a while, and cycling in Wellington has always been a little bit of an uphill battle, literally. But now I've got on this new thing. I was very reluctant to get an e-bike. I thought it would completely undermine my street cred as a cyclist. But it's really great. And I've just got a new baby as well. That was the main reason for getting the e-bike. I was going to bring her as kind of a prop, but I think she's having a nap. We can get around together, and we're just loving it so far. It's been a couple of weeks. I work over at the university and I live in Rongotai, so I've got a fair whack of a commute and through a couple of quite built up areas as well. So I think that it's really my experience as a cyclist that's made it possible for me to make this transition. And I really feel for people who don't have that experience as kind of a gung-ho young person who isn't carrying another being on the back of their bike. And it really makes me appreciate safe cycleways. And as she gets older and she's able to bike on her own, those will be really important for us as well. I think in my submission, I had a couple of things to say about specific streets around Kilbirnie and just where the council had thought it was best to put in cycleways. Some of them, you know, sometimes change is just a little bit unusual and it seems a little bit odd. I think though that there's real benefit in looking at where people already cycle. Cyclists are kind of like a form of water, you know, they go where they want to go. That's one of the magics of cycling. And so if you can look at the routes that people are taking and think, okay, why are they taking them? There's generally a reason. And sometimes that's just traffic and things that will be fixed by putting in a new cycleway, but sometimes it's hills. Sometimes it's just, you know, one route is prettier than another as well. So I think there's a plan to put a cycleway, I can't remember the name of the streets, you know, the State Highway 1 coming out of the tunnel. Whereas I always take Moxham Ave because it's slightly more direct and it hasn't got as much traffic on it. So there's a few things like that. And as a person who has been kind of an experienced cyclist and now a more burdened cyclist, I know that there's some tensions between cyclists who want to go fast and who want to go fast because they get there really fast and it's a really efficient mode of transport, and then cyclists who want to take their time and are maybe a little bit more cautious. And there's a lot of tensions around the waterfront, particularly with these two types of cyclists, I think. People who really just want to get where they're going and people who slow down and kind of take their time. So I think it would be really good if the council, when it's planning infrastructure, could sort of think about providing maybe more than one route. A route that's faster and maybe has you know, less separation from cars even, and then a route that's more kind of leisurely. Anyway, I think that's all I've got to say.
Ka pai. Ngā mihi, Isabel, thank you for that submission. So now we've got about 20 minutes to have a bit of a discussion to dig into some of those points that were raised by our submitters. So councillors and Mayor, if you have any questions for our submitters, feel free to use the hand up function and we can get underway. So maybe I'll start. Zara, I really liked the really practical suggestions that you had in your submission, and I just wondered if there were any that you weren't able to add in because of the time. So I had grade separation, bike paths going both ways, do work while you're doing the stabilising work, more bike racks on buses, and law reform. Were there any other kind of like constructive suggestions you had and weren't able to cover?
I'll just have a look at my document. Yes, there was a couple about the law reform, and there was, yeah, it was mainly bike lanes going both ways. You want like a raised median. I really like the suggestion earlier about potentially having two routes for the two different people. There was also one which I was thinking about on the waterfront. It would be so easy just to do a line through the middle to say pedestrians this side, bike lane this side, because there's nothing like that currently and people are just all over the place because there's no sort of order. Just things like that. It could be like a short-term option because, you know, it's not super clear with the raised median and everything, but I think if the plan is going to take so long to implement, then we should be thinking about these short to medium term options to make cycling better. I think that was, yeah, that was most of it.
Awesome. No, that's perfect. Thank you for that. And just with these questions, because we've got 6 participants, if we can just keep the answers just so that other people have time to speak, that would be awesome, just so we can share the extra time around. Okay, so Mayor Foster's got a question.
Yeah, first of all, apologies for not being able to be in on the front end of the call, and congratulations, Isabel. My question is probably the first one is to Tony, and it's just thinking about the what I get the impression you're suggesting is a continuity of the shared path cycleway along the I suppose it's the northern side of Moorfield Road. Does that work going past some of the major facilities there, like Waitohi, you know, the bus stops, etc.? How would you see that being resolved in terms of conflict in that area?
Well, I'd turn my video on if someone would let me.
Is it, you mean screen share again?
For some reason.
Apologies,
Yeah.
it was to do with screen sharing, yeah.
Yeah, maybe not. We won't do screen sharing in this part, but just if you could just speak to the answer, that would be awesome.
So I wasn't trying to screen share, just trying to turn my video on. So in terms of Moorfield Road, well, obviously, you know, that was, you know, one of the, you know, when you're going to sort out these things, and I've heard other submitters say that you should also sort out the bus service as well. You know, JCA strongly objected to the bus stops going on Moorfield Road for exactly this reason, which is it's overloaded. You know, I think that's where, you know, you've got a pretty significant budget, and hopefully that can remediate a couple of those, you know, those key pinch points along Moorfield Road. Certainly the impact will be easier to sort out on Moorfield Road than along Johnsonville Road in terms of any cycleway improvements. In fact, you've already got the width along most of that road, and it, you know, it also saves you having to have having cyclist path cross over the very busy Moorfield Road end, where's the off ramp, on ramp for that big roundabout. So yeah, it's a bit of horses for courses, you know, but yeah, there's work to be done.
Thank you.
Cool, and then next on the list we've got Councillor Rush.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Michelle, in your submission, you talk about the difficulties of getting up Onslow Road, which I can totally sympathise with. And Isabel, you also mentioned Salamanca Road, and as a former walked up from the terrace every day, I can sympathise with that too. So, you know, then this proliferates across where I'm in now, in Roseneath and Hataitai, getting from these main roads that commute into town back up to where I am at home is a struggle for average people. I'd like to understand what your solutions are. Michelle, you mentioned the Druid Hill elevator. I can't find anything on that online, but I do know that there are mechanical sort of solutions to these. So I'm interested to hear if you've got any intelligence around what they might look like, and can we take a look at them?
Yeah, I had, we holidayed last year in Wanganui, and one of the exciting things about that particular city is that they have this amazing elevator that's been there for many years, I think almost getting on towards 100, which takes people from the river valley up to a hill suburb. And it's quite awesome. It's got a little bit of a tourist history associated with it, but it did strike me as a out there and potentially useful solution to a hilly suburb and or a hilly city, and in this case it was what Wanganui put in many years ago for their residents. And you can take bike and you take yourself in it. So it was slightly tongue-in-cheek and slightly serious. We have got such a crazy city with our crazy topography that we may need to look at crazy solutions, and they may look like not swing bridges, but suspension bridges over some of our gullies that take a cycleway. And Japan has some beautiful examples of those for cycling. Or it might look like elevators up steep hills to get around very difficult roading areas. And Onslow Road is a classic. I would be terrified to ride my bike up there. My husband does, but then he's one of those people you class as a mammal at times, you know, middle-aged man in lycra. And I'm not really quite in that category. I've usually got my high heels on and my dress. I'm not going to go up there. And that said, people live on Onslow Road who want to ride their bikes because it's so damn close to town. So we need a solution. So I'm just saying, let's think a bit out there. Let's not be hard and fast with this. We've got to find a way to make Mochi work for everybody as far as we possibly can.
It strikes me that the cable car is the obvious solution to get cyclists up to the flat part of Salamanca Road. Do you think, Isabel?
Yeah, I love the cable car, and I would totally take my bike on it. It's a lot easier now that there are no cruise ship passengers, except that it's really expensive. It's like $4, $5 each way. It's crazy. So luckily the e-bike has solved my issue, but I've spent many years at the university thinking about that hill. I've thought about an elevator, I've thought about another cable car, and now that they've bought that apartment block, so they're going to kind of connect it to Gusney.
Oh, the Wilson one, that put the cable car in. Yes, I'm right behind it. My dream as well.
I've thought about just one of those, like, you know, those things they have at airports that kind of, those travelators, if it just went all the way up the hill. How cool that would be.
I mean, dream about that every day. Yeah.
Otherwise, okay. I guess the only option is just recognizing that those streets are going to be really slow. They're going to have a 30k speed limit, and there's going to be cyclists going 20k or 10k up them because there's nowhere else to go?
Well, I walk them, to be honest. My push bike's a real push bike.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. No, great conversation going on there. Councillor Day.
Kia ora. Thank you all for your contributions today. It's good to hear different perspectives. I'm just curious about the Johnsonville option, Tony, that you're talking about, and I wonder if you think it's not possible to have both Moorfield and Johnsonville Road, because from your description, they've got quite different needs from cyclists. So Moorfield Road, you're talking about, school students and that being an important connector, whereas for people coming from the north, it's our only connector through from Pūroro, Tawa further north to get through into the city. And for most of those cyclists, they would go down Ngāronga Gorge, because otherwise it's quite a detour to go all the back way through to Niall. So do you think there is a possibility that you could have both roads accommodating cyclists for different needs? And David might have a perspective on this as a Johnsonville resident as well, that there's different needs and different ways that people cycle.
Yeah, well, I think that Johnsonville Road has already got some very basic protection for cyclists, and they're certainly not wishing to remove that or change that in any way. That works. My observation of people who take on you just had a comment about the hill up to Victoria University. Well, that's nothing compared to Ngāronga Gorge, where you're going up an 80k along a path that gets down to about 1 metre wide. Now, I'm sure that there'll be some investment to improve on that, but really you are, and you've already, that's after cycling 10k to get out of town. That's, it's 10k, and so the reason we want Johnsonville Road taken out of the plan is because we think the cycling infrastructure there for those brave, hardy people who want to take on that sort of cycling trip, that's satisfactory, because anyone who's going to cycle up and down, Ngāronga Gorge is certainly capable of cycling along Johnsonville Road at 50k when, when there's already some protection. So what we've got there is enough, and that's what we, and the impact, of course, then you've got to balance out the impact of changing it all around as well. So that's why we'd rather focus on safety and on Moorfield Road, because that's where we see the big benefits of the aims of the cycling plan, which is to promote cycling. The people who are going to take on, Ngāronga Gorge are already avid cyclists, experienced cyclists. There's only an experienced cyclist would do that. I've already talked to some cyclists and they take Ngāronga Gorge because it's 50k roads even when you're on the road. And a slip is not going to kill you. It could get hurt, but it's not going to kill you. So that's why we thought, in fact, that was the City Council's plan. And so the bike plan came something of a surprise to us when we saw Ngāronga Gorge being focused on instead of Ngāronga Gorge, and taking, Gary's point too, we've got to look at the benefits across the whole community of making these changes. And yeah. Is that your question?
Let's go David and then Michelle. I see you wanted to just add on to that as well.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Just around Johnsonville, okay, because I know a little bit about it. Yeah, it's a tight city, so I don't see a simple solution other than using back roads, really. It's probably in line with Moorfield Road's quite busy too. Yeah, so I've really got nothing to add. It's a dilemma and I don't have the answer, so I'll stop there, I think. Thank you.
Kia ora, David.
And Michelle?
I just thought given I shop fairly frequently at Johnsonville, I just thought I'd give a slightly different perspective, I guess, or just thinking about this. I think I'm hearing that your perspective is that the route through Johnsonville Road is to cater for the ones who want to go to town down Ngāronga Gorge, and I understand why you would have that perspective if you're thinking of those being the only ones using it. I suppose from my perspective as a resident, because I'm in Niall, so often I'm going to Johnsonville either to go to the mall or one of the other shops. I can see real benefit in Johnsonville being made more attractive as a whole for residents to be accessing via bicycle, and again, this is where e-bikes have transformed things. It's no longer a hassle to get from Newlands to Johnsonville and back again on an e-bike, because going up the hill is a breeze, and so suddenly there are real options to not have to drive your car. And if we're thinking about wanting to create 20-minute cities for the future, and I'm talking about the future now, not people today, we have to provide for that now. And I can see the potential for better cycling, safe infrastructure down Johnsonville Road, plus the Moorfield, combined with some really nice ways of improving the streetscape, because it's a lovely sunny stretch, that really enhancing Johnsonville for the businesses and for the residents. And so I like to think of it as providing for those people that way. As a regular driver of a car down that way, I never really expect to be able to park on that stretch. Often I can, but there's plenty of other parking options which will stay, for the around, which make it very easy to access. And I think there are ways and means to ensure people who arrive via car who are disabled are also provided for as is necessary. So I guess I'm saying I wouldn't like us to see us write this off. I think perhaps it's thinking about what cyclists are we providing here, and if it's our local people, that's quite a different solution to the ones who would be quite okay with the on the street infrastructure that's currently there. But my suspicion is that actually for the future we want the people, the locals using it and cycling, not the ones who are passing through going down Nodanga at 60k and quite okay and they're likely to do it. Thanks.
Cool, thank you. Councillor Matthews.
Yes, my question was for Gary, and I was about, I guess, the comments you were making about the importance of having car parks near places where people want to go for elderly, some elderly and disabled people. And I guess I was just wondering, are you because what we were talking about with bike lanes and with bus lanes for somewhere like Pūroro Road, yes, there'd be reduction of car parking, but many people who do want to use these other forms of transport would have better choices. So could it actually, we could do some improvements for disabled people and elderly people and actually make them the focus of the car parking that we have?
Yeah, look, I think my point was more that Marsden Village in particular, where else are they going to park? So, if you remove all the car parking and put in bus lanes or cycle lanes, particularly on the eastern side of the road, where are they going to park? You then go down the hill, down Karori Road, and then you're expecting to traipse up. I think it's good to encourage mode shift, but in terms of the number of people, for example, that use some of those businesses in Marsden Village in particular, they don't. I mean, you can try and improve public transport, but for a lot of them, it is a destination. So the people coming from far and wide, and public transport is not always as easy as it could be. And if mum wants to put her kids in the car and come down and get a haircut or pick up the books that the kids need for school, she's not going to put them on the back of a bike and do it. They don't have time to do that. I'm just trying to convey the reality for many families, which is if they're shopping with their kids and it's after school, and that's the key time for Marsden Village in particular, how they're going to get there? It is by vehicle. It's not by bike. Sorry, it's not by bus. Sorry, because that is not a convenient and quick way for that particular sort of shopping. So I guess when you're talking about the mode shift and how you allocate the road space, and I understand that this bike network is premised on your parking strategy that you adopted a year or two back, whenever it was. I guess just factor in the fact that not everyone is a candidate for public transport or bikes. Many of them are, and I think it's encouraging to see that sort of mode shift will happen. But there's still the numbers that even if you increased it by 100, 200 or 300%, it's still only a minute portion of, for many of these businesses, their customers and the reality. And I made the point in here, and I'll use the example, how often do you see someone that's gone into a hairdresser, they've spent an hour getting their hair done for some event that night and go out and put the helmet on and bike home. The reality is that doesn't happen. I'm not saying that some people don't go to the barber on their bike, but got to be real, guys. And I'll give you one other example, and I'm aware of one in Auckland. Anyone that knows the French Cafe and the old cycle, the penny farthing cycle shop up on the top of Simon Street. So the council, the local board up there, put a cycle lane in out adjacent to those particular businesses about 4 or 5 years ago. 18 months later, the dairy had closed down, the penny farthing cycle had closed down. And you know why? Because they weren't able to get customers able to pop into them. There was public parking probably 100, 120 metres away, but they couldn't get delivery of bikes to their shop, so they were forced to close down. The only business that remained there was the French Cafe, and it was, you know, voted one of the top fine dining restaurants a few years ago, so it was going to remain. So it's interesting, in that instance, I saw where they put a cycle lane in, promised the world, and it cost those businesses their livelihood. So just consider that as you plan this.
There we go. So we've got time for one last question. Might let the Mayor ask just because he hasn't asked too many today. Sorry, Sean, but I'm sure you have another crack later on. So yeah, go ahead. Andy.
Yeah, look, my question, probably particularly to Tony and Gary, but others might want to contribute to this as well, is just the option of putting in, as we've got at the moment in Island Bay, a sort of a speed limit restricted area supported by engineering. In other words, you've got speed hubs there as well, which I think is possibly where Michelle was going for Johnsonville Road. How does that work for you? Because it retains parking, but it means you get the speeds down, and particularly with e-bikes, of course, 30 k's is eminently achievable.
Well, if I just comment very quickly, again, I've seen those implemented in a number of places around Auckland, because I'm familiar with that one, and they work well. And you know, that's great for shopping areas because it slows people down, and I've got more opportunity to stop and see what's going on. So, good opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, Johnsonville, unfortunately, it suffers terribly, Johnsonville Road especially, because it's the main access way to a whole lot of other suburbs, you know. So, you know, Churton Park, half of Churton Park drives through Johnsonville into work, and so does a good part of Paparangi. And so that road is variously either already really slow because of congestion, or it's very, very busy because, you know, there's truck also, and being a major retail centre, you've got all the problems of any major suburban centre. You know, we're the largest suburban centre in Wellington, and so we've got truck deliveries, you've got people visiting, you've got all sorts of things happening all the time. And so, yes, I mean, I guess that position would be is we're very, very car dominated suburb, and we're more centralized because much of the rest of the city has shorter distances to smaller hubs. It's a different style up there, and you can see it in our mode share usage of driving. We're not a walkable space because too much of our people live too far to walk, and very few, as shown by the stats, actually cycle as well. And so the answer I would say is yes, absolutely try it, but try it out in other parts of Wellington first and prove its success, because we're a more marginal case. You know, we're a tougher nut to crack in terms that we are going to have to reduce car usage by a much greater proportion to bring us into line with the rest, you know, with some other major cities such as Newtown, Haitaitai, Kilburnie, that sort of place.
Awesome. Well, that brings us actually perfectly to the end of our session today. But thank you so much, everyone, for coming to talk to us. There was a really good range of perspectives and people from different areas of the city and different backgrounds, and it was really nice to hear the mix of different views and ideas about what we can do going forward. So thank you so much for your time, and looking forward to engaging with you more as we progress through this plan. And councillors and mayor will be back for the final session of the hearings today at 2:40 p.m. So you've got time for a small little break before the rest of our hearings. So thanks, everybody.
Everyone.
Kia ora, everyone. Welcome back to our fourth session of hearings today for Paneke Pōneke, which is our bike network plan for Wellington City. So basically you're joined by your fellow councillors, and maybe the mayor might jump in at some point as well. And basically you've got 5 minutes to kōrero to us, but because there are only 3 of you on at the moment, maybe you can have a little bit longer just to speak to your submission and to speak to the plan. And then after that, we'll have a bit of a kōrero, a bit of a discussion. We might ask some questions, and we can talk about different points that you raise in your submissions. But thank you so much for making time for us on this lovely muggy afternoon. So we're going to kick off with Amy, who is joining us from the National Council of Women Wellington branch. So kia ora, Amy, you're welcome to speak to your submission.
Kia ora koutou, ko Amy Rice toko ingoa. And as Timothy said, I'm here on behalf of National Council of Women. We held a What Wellington Women Want session back before these submissions were submitted, and it was great to get some views from a group of women who live in Wellington, and then we kind of collated their views on the bike network. And there were some kind of contrasting views, so I sort of tried to do my best to capture where we sort of landed. And I'm not sure it will take me a full 5 minutes. I'm very happy to have questions to kind of stimulate more discussion after that. It would be awesome. So I think it was kind of among half of the participants really supportive of the bike network plan. We think it's great. We love to cycle more. We'd love to see more e-scooters, just feel like it's not safe at the moment. And so very supportive that something's being put in place. And overall, it seemed like most key locations were covered by the proposed network. And we'd be keen to see it rolled out quickly, especially if you start implementing it in some places, you can see that it's working well and hopefully gain some momentum to then get public buy-in and then keep rolling it out elsewhere. So very supportive of that and all the benefits that would bring. There were some concerns around what the implications might be of putting the network in for car parking spaces and making sure that for accessibility reasons, car parking was still available for people who don't have the option of cycling and would still need to be able to drive and park close to where they need to be, and that having more bikes around, they were put in a place where people who are walking, who perhaps didn't got great hearing, aren't jeopardized by having too many bikes rushing close to them or things like that. Sorry. And then there were some suggestions that buses should be fixed before bikes. So to sort that at first, which I know is coming through that some of the other plans that were up for submissions, and then worry about bikes. Sorry, those are things at the top of my mind. And then, like I said, it would be great to actually kōrero and chat and answer questions and stuff, because I'm sure there's a lot more that was said that I'm now struggling to remember to relay. Sorry, thank you.
All good. I'm sure Andrew and Celeste have just left, but I was just going to say, I'm sure they'll have some stuff in their submission that will spark some whakaaro for you, or some thoughts or things that were brought up at the What Wellington Women Want. Those sessions are awesome. But I feel that Andrew and Celeste have just dropped out. Oh, here they are, they're back. Stand by, sorry, so guys. Oh, kia ora, welcome back, Andrew and Celeste. Perfect timing. It's both of your turns to submit, so I'll leave it up to you to decide who wants to go first. And you've got 5 minutes each to speak to your submission.
Excellent. Can you hear us?
Yep.
Okay, good. Just checking. Oh, the Zoom is rather flaky on this computer, so. Okay, so Celeste will start.
No, I want you to go first.
No. Put your ones first on the sheet, please.
Okay. I love the idea about the Kids Freedom Network and the I love the idea about the Kids Freedom Network, the slash the Bike Network plan. It will give me a safer route to school and it will be a slightly longer one, but safer one than but still safer than the one I take to school currently. I ride to school each day. I can because it's good for the environment and it's difficult to find car parks by our school. I'm able to ride, so why shouldn't I? My route to school is really busy, particularly Paris Street, Iris Street and Strathmore Avenue. I once had a close pass. I could have sworn it was 10 centimeters away from hitting my mirror. It was really freaky, and when a bus and an enormous truck gives you less space than cars. We used to ride our Darlington Road, but now we avoid it entirely for this reason. I should have the right to ride to school safely to school. Physical separation would give me one less thing to worry about. Riding on the roads with the traffic, you have to worry about cars, buses, trucks, especially garbage trucks, which are really annoying because they take forever and you're not sure if you want to pass them as they're really big. And passing garbage truck as a kid is freaky. By the time you check it's safe to pass, you're not sure if they're about to get moving again, and just before you're about to get back into your lane. I've seen cars parked in unclear bike lanes, the old Evans Bay route, and I had to drive into the traffic, so please make sure the cars can't park in the bike lane. I think that you should include Power Street and Darlington Road, considering that there are two schools on either side of Power Street, and it would be much easier for people living on the hill, given this road goes past both of them. It would make trip up to Kairangi School significantly off-road. And finally, those businesses who feel that only cars who drive those who drive cars go into their shops. When we are in the city and we go back, like how we don't stop at the shop, but when we're on the bike and on the bus, we want to shop up locally because you can't do a quick dash back to a cheaper store or back home to get something to eat.
Oh, well done, Celeste. That was amazing. That was such a good submission. You raised really excellent points, and I'm sure we've all got heaps of questions to really dig into some of your experiences riding a bike around. So thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us today. And now we're going to pass it over to Andrew to do your submission.
Yeah. So as a Miramar resident and a father of my lovely Celeste, I'm really excited by this proposal. It'll be a positive step change for the safety of myself and my family each day. The extensive, the network as a start is great, but needs to be and can reasonably be much more extensive, particularly on our generously wide streets in Miramar. I've taught my children, now 8 and 11, how to confidently ride on busy roads to cars, trucks and buses. However, I may question my sanity, or at least the wisdom. Others congratulate me on our confidence and skill. There should not be choices any parent has to make, whether or not to have your children ride in busy traffic. A separated cycleway allows safe, efficient, carbon-free travel. In my family, a rapid rollout may allow my children to ride home rather than be collected by car from their primary school. My darling wife rightly questions the wisdom of a ride back home without such protection. Onto specific changes, there is, as you'd see in some of the heat maps from the exercise applications like Strava, a lot of cycle traffic on Darlington Road, Para Street and Tianu Road, plus filtering between these on the likes of Brussels Street. These are big wide roads, can easily accommodate a similar treatment, provide great access to the Miramar Cutting and Miramar Avenue and Iris Street, which seem to be the real go-to destinations from our end of Miramar. We're in Miramar North. I'd love to see Strathmore Avenue included and a move towards a policy that all schools should actually be on the network. For the safety conscious last mile, for the safety conscious parents and cyclists, that last mile really matters. You can have the awesome cycle network, but if it doesn't get you that last little bit, then people don't feel that they can do it. This has come to a lot of the debate around whether cycles should be on footpaths and other things, because it's, you know, if you can only get that far, it's really tough. So Strathmore Ave is a really, really busy road. Now we ride straight down the middle of it, but we actually find it really, really quite intimidating doing that. So having, you know, a proper cycle provision on that road would be also really awesome. Finally, I'd say please roll this out fast. Pick a template for each road width and stick to it for consistency. Please ensure you give good notice, you get from your staff, good notice for proposed reseal projects, and have a rule that a reseal can't go ahead until the interim bike network on that resealed road is done, so that you avoid the ghost markings that, you know, keeps on coming up and removes the credibility from the council's operations. Little details like that will help make this rollout, you know, much smoother. So it doesn't feel like council's coming back and doing a road twice. But yeah, really excited by what's there. I ride to the city and I've seen the real change in how I feel about my ride since the Evans Bay route has been worked on, and I'd love to see more of this.
Awesome, Andrew. Thank you so much for your submission as well. So now we have time for some discussion and some questions. So we're going to start off with Councillor Matthews.
Is it okay if my first question is for Celeste? Is that okay, Celeste? Okay, you did such a good job, so I think you can answer this. So tell me, when you can ride, you have a really good ride to school and you can do the whole thing and you feel safe and you kind of, how does that make you feel?
Well, I remember once doing one, but not quite to school because there's no off-road bits on my route. I always find it safe because I'm quite used to it, but on other roads like into the city and the new road that goes on there, I remember loving it because I didn't need to look out for traffic at all, and all I needed to look out for, and I actually had time to look at my speed, and the cycle path was so wide, I thought I was on the, for a moment, I thought I was on the road without any traffic.
What a great feeling. Thank you.
And I actually also had a question for Celeste. Sorry, Amy and Andrew. But I guess I just wanted to ask Celeste, when you're at school, do more of your friends cycle, or do any of them say like that they wish that they could bike to school, or what do your friends think about it? Are they keen to ride? Are they scared to ride to school? I mean, what do you hear at school?
Had a friend named John Paul ask tell me that his parents said he couldn't come or bike to school on his own because his parents said it wasn't safe, and he's around the same age as me. Yeah, and I know some of my teachers ride to school. I know my teacher rides an electric bike to school, and I know my friend Sam has a bike, and I know people occasionally do it, but I don't think they do it that often because one, more people scooter, and two, well, it's not exactly the best spot to be riding because you have to go through a roundabout, and no one on a bike likes roundabouts. And you need to go through the roundabout to get to school, or you go off the pull off the road and walk past it.
I guess it's like how your dad said in his submission that all the schools have to be a part of that network, and that's a really good point there about the roundabouts as well. And luckily we've got pretty much the boss of the Kids Freedom Network listening in as well, so I'm sure some of those changes will be able to be considered and added into the network plan. So thanks for that. So now we've got Councillor Rush with a question.
Yeah, Andrew, sorry, couldn't resist having cycled the Evans Bay Parade, bits that are done, I suppose, but also, you know, I did go for a ride from the Hataitai end, trying to get round the top, but I ran straight into a northwester that just about stopped me in my tracks. So how do you deal with that, Andrew? Please tell me.
Just big legs. I do it with big panniers on, and I take the pannier covers off, otherwise I'd lose them. But yeah, you just really push at it, and then when you get round, there's this real buzz of I've finally got past that. I've done it into the strongest of those winds.
My dad made me do that when I was like 8. I hated it. I kept refusing to go into the city on the bike because I kept remembering that part of the ride, and like kept on going, I remember that was awful. It was so strong winds. And so no matter if the wind's behind you or in front of you, you're always going to get pushed in the face and backwards. So I just don't like it.
Yeah, my mum and dad made me do 7 Ks each way when I was about 10 as well, and didn't like it either, but it wasn't in Wellington.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Awesome. Councillor Day.
Kia ora. I've got a pātai for Andrew. Just thinking about your commute into the city that you do, because obviously you do it quite regularly. How long does it take, out of curiosity? Because I don't live out that way.
It's about 35 minutes on the bike, and sort of I usually budget about 45 door to door and a bit more for changing. So
that's awesome. You must drive past a lot of people who are sitting in cars.
Yeah, particularly you used to notice it on the old Oriental Parade Evans Bay stuff, because they would back up through Oriental Parade and you'd be coming past them on the left. It's changed the last little bit. I don't know, pandemic and other things, but yeah, it's good fun.
Oh, awesome. And just one other question, because now you're getting to enjoy and appreciate the new infrastructure, you probably really notice the difference where it's not, where the infrastructure isn't. So I guess it's quite interesting to hear your reflections of that real contrast that you're now experiencing, because for many people they're just biking without any good infrastructure. So what are the bits that you really love about it?
Well, yeah, where it's done well around Evans Bay is just amazing. I mean, I chose to live in the eastern suburbs. We bought a house here partly because it was one of the few bits that actually had infrastructure. I briefly considered Island Bay and thought, well, I'm going to be fighting for years through traffic down through there. And here, you know, once I get to the Miramar cutting, it's pretty good the rest of the way in. And I remember noticing that I spent a lot of money on bike lights and things because, you know, I really am worried about being seen, door zone, that kind of thing, particularly. And I have thought, actually, that's not needed as much as it was when I was really worried about the door zone coming in on that cycleway, because you were right up against those cars, and you know, and so yeah, it feels much, you know, I'm really looking forward to that last bit being done. I use the shared path for south of Niwa, and so it's really protected for the whole way. Now, I'm very glad council's agreed to improve that, but it's not being in that spot where I mean, I had to get around buses. Like there's one spot around Evans Bay where the buses had decided this was their layover, and it was on dashed lines and all the rest. And so you're pulling out into traffic to get around the back of a bus parked on dotted yellow lines and things. You're just not going to have that when you've got a properly segregated network.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Can't forget buses when you're on a bike, can you?
Yeah.
Kia ora.
Cool. Councillor Matthews.
I've got a question for Amy, and I've been to some of those sessions previously, and they're really good ones that the National Council of Women run. And I'm wondering, because you sort of talked about these kind of two groups with quite different views. And so I'm interested to know, was there any sort of characteristics that were obvious to you about the two different groups? Like, how would you describe them? And how did they interact with each other? Were there any sort of, were people kind of having a discussion back and forth, or how did that work?
It comes down to age, bluntly, is that the older participants, they have the accessibility concern. And obviously there's not just accessibility. Older people, concerned about people with disabilities, and even young mums with prams, like things like that. And it's more the younger people who see the benefits, that are likely to be able to cycle, and are more eco-conscious as well, I find. And this is actually something that's not just in the What Wellington Women Want sessions, this is also within the National Council of Women. In our usual meetings, is that divide kind of comes up. So I think it's something we're quite used to dealing with. It did make it quite hard to compile the submission, because it was just more people share their views and we just note them, and there wasn't too much back and forth. It was just kind of like, oh yeah, valid point, yes, valid point, and then we just noted them all down and ended up with this slightly not so cohesive submission. Yeah.
Sorry, just to quickly follow up on that. So was it a bit like one group is like, yes, I want to do this and this would help me, or I do this and I think it would be better, and the other group's a little bit like a fear of missing out, or that it's going to make their life worse? Or
I think it's how the two groups weigh up the benefits versus the costs. So one group, both agree that there are large costs involved, and one group says the benefits really outweigh those because it's so important for the environment and the health benefits, and the other group says, actually no, these costs outweigh any benefits, not just for me, but in general how they perceive the potential benefits, as they just don't think it'd be worth it, and that there are too many risks involved and people who will be made worse off as a result.
Awesome. Kia ora. Thanks for that, Amy. And I've just also noticed that we've got Bethany from different spokes in the Zoom now. So this might be a good opportunity to give you your time to speak to your submission on behalf of different spokes. So thank you for joining us, and we might have some questions for you afterwards. So yeah, take it away.
Thank you. Yes, sorry, I ended up in the wrong room, so thank you for your patience. So yeah, I helped put together our submission, and the main thing is wanting to just really reiterate the importance of this, like a really strong and safe connected network that's connected between suburbs, so it doesn't just value commuters, but it values everyone across our community, including the rainbow community, and really safe, so that it feels safe to ride for the rainbow community, who are disproportionately affected by things like sexual violence, especially the trans community. And of course, that can come into play with things like lighting, but also the way that public art is used and other forms of presentation. So things like that beautiful rainbow crossing that we have in Cuba Street, things like that. But art, murals, anything that is made especially by the queer community. So that's by the queer community, and to help the queer and rainbow community feel really welcome, and sort of, I guess, wider LGBTQIA+ community, however people identify. So yeah, all of those things are really important. And I've sort of reached out to the different spokes queer cycling group in finding out what people want in general for this year, and it turns out there's several members who don't actually ride in Wellington, but they can ride a bike, and they would so love to ride, but they just don't feel safe yet because of the network that we currently have. And I would love to help them feel safe, and so creating a plan that is both safe in terms of road safety, but also safe in terms of feeling safe and being safe from any kind of predator as well as from other vehicles, I think is really important. And it's really important that with both interim solutions and permanent solutions, that we do make them beautiful, strong, and lasting. A quick note on parking, and sort of, because I know that cycle networks can often feel like they're coming at odds with car parks. I think it's really important to reiterate that, you know, a car park is a space for one person, sort of private property, and that could be so much more usefully used and have so much more value if it's given to the community in other ways. If it means that there's thinner roads for other motor vehicles to drive on, that can actually also be a positive, because that means that places between suburbs and inner city places will feel less like a motorway, and it will actually encourage motorists, even if it's a sort of unconscious thing, to drive slower and to be a lot more careful of other road users who use micro-mobility, including cycling. So it's, yeah, I think it couldn't be more of a positive. And of course, the more people using bikes or other micro-mobility to get around, the less need there will be for car parking anyway. And on the note of bike parking, in the same way of any kind of sort of public art welcoming the community into using really great bike networks, great bike parking can do the same thing. And great effective bike parking, more effective bike parking, and bike parking that is beautiful and queer welcoming in how it is presented. So I think those are the main points, and I just want to really reiterate again, oh actually before I say that, just one more thing on on car parks, is that, oh yes, of course this isn't, it's sort of adjacent to the bike network plan. You know, there is a lot of talk and rhetoric and fear from local businesses about car parks taking away from business. But my experience has always been the opposite, because if you think of Cuba Street, for example, it's those sort of spots, especially away from car parks, that, you know, people really flock to those places. And, you know, when we do picnics in parks, which is also very bike friendly, people flock to that, and we are all using those local cafes to get our drinks. So it's actually, in a way, bringing in more business, and that's something we're really excited for. But before I close, I wanted to reiterate, it's not just about the centre of the city, it's about really valuing everyone all around the city, those who don't work in the city, and those who don't have a need to be in the city all the time. It's about also valuing those people and making it really safe to get around between suburbs, and making bike commuting just more normal for any kind of commuting, any kind of getting from A to B. And so yeah, having less motor traffic flow around those areas is so valuable.
Kia ora, Bethany, thank you for that submission, and I really enjoyed the different spoke submission. And even I didn't really consider that you might be able to use like the urban design principles of SEPTED in designing cycleways. Like I kind of didn't really put those together, because so that was really interesting as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
But yeah, thank you for that. So do we have any questions for our submitters, councillors? Oh, cool. Councillor Date's got apartheid.
I was just thinking, Celeste, does your school have a bike track? You know how some of the schools have bike tracks where children can learn to ride bikes at school? Do you have access to one like that?
Not really. Occasionally these people come around to our school to help teach us the kids how to ride. We have these little things that go up and down like that, but those get brought in and taken away. But
So they
other
bring
than that,
ramps, do
not
they?
really. No.
Do you know if
We're trying to get one.
yeah.
A while ago, I was involved in trying to help with that. I'm not sure if that's actually going to happen in like a decade or something.
Or hopefully it does happen soon. Do you notice when the people come to, I think it's probably Pete already come to teach people how to bike, do you notice how many of your friends and other people in your class can ride a bike? Is it?
Oh, almost everybody can ride a bike. Like everyone can ride a bike in my class, I think. Just not very many people do it as much. But I think everyone's able to do it. Well,
So if we had a safe net,
that's not able to.
Wow, so if we had a safe network, you reckon they would be jumping on bikes,
Maybe.
biking around? Thank you.
They're all able to do it. No reason not.
Thank you.
That's such a good point. Such a good point, Celeste. Councillor Rush.
Yeah, it sort of kind of follows on from what Celeste was saying. It just makes me wonder. That might be a really unfair question for you, Andrew, but as a fellow parent of young children, I do wonder, do you think that our perceptions as parents of safety and danger of kids going off to school, like certainly I used to do anyway, have we got an elevated sense of the dangers that perhaps didn't exist, 30, 40 years ago? I'm just mindful of the submission, I think, from Celeste, talked about Darlington Road, I think, and around there being quite wide, and it is quite residential, and I do sort of wonder whether it's quite safe as a residential street to cycle in.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm very fortunate that I grew up in Canberra, and so my primary school, I don't remember not riding to school, but I was able to ride on a separated path, much like you'd find with Leonie Gill pathway, and I rode down what was a footpath. Everything in Canberra, no matter whether it looks like a footpath or looks like a bike path, is a shared path. That's just how things have always been. So I'd ride down that path, down a drainway, cross one road, and then I'd ride up along the creek to school. So it was started very easy and safe for me. And then when I moved to high school, I navigated through the streets between paths, footpaths, and little bits of roads to connect up a route to my high school. So I stayed off the roads, and even in university, I would take the route that would take me a longer route, but off the roads. So that's always been my preference. It's just being well away from the traffic. Totally separated was a beauty that Canberra's had from its design, and so that's always been my preference. So I haven't known how New Zealand's changed in terms of, but I mean, for example, Darlington Road, it's now a very frequent bus route, which is awesome. I can go down there and get on a bus really quickly. But in the morning, that means that you're always going to have 2 or 3 buses and a cycle moves at the same speed as a bus. So you're generally leapfrogging buses, and that's never a good look for kids. So that's why we now take Totara Road and come down Āmua Road, because we just get to avoid that bit where there's just quite so many buses in the morning.
It also avoids a headwind, which is in my favor. I hate headwinds.
Just by going, yeah, because it's in and around, it gives us some relief from that. So yeah, I certainly wish I had what I grew up with a city where it was really easy just to be able to get to that school with really being well off the roads.
I'm just wondering, maybe Celeste can answer, how are the kids that don't cycle to school, how do they get to school? Are their mum and dad dropping them off?
I think majority people go by car, but I do know some people that go by bus. I see people leaving school by bus. I'm not sure if you're able to come to school by bus for our school. I'm not sure, but I think the majority of people actually come by car. There's actually really no safe route, really safe off-road route, off or on-road route to school, because all of the paths are not really not even a meter wide, I think, to get to our school. So the majority of people just go by car or bus.
Yeah.
I don't know very many people that go by bike like me.
Okay, thanks.
Awesome, thank you. And Councillor Matthews.
Just a question for Bethany. I want to say how much I enjoyed the different spokes, the forum you had, and just kind of wondering, just because it's great to see you here, it's the first time I've seen your organisation, you're new, and what kind of response you've had. Has there been a sort of a big latent kind of rainbow cycling activism there, and what kind of response have you had from the community?
Thank you. Do you mean like the response to the group coming out? Oh, cool. Yeah, well, firstly, this is not just about the group, but we hosted a rainbow forum about the Our City Tomorrow submissions, and a huge amount of people came. It was absolutely incredible. And so that was really exciting to see how many people do want to make Wellington more safe and more welcoming, and how many people are excited about actioning those changes. And in terms of different spokes cycling group, it is, yeah, it's only been, I think it was created late last year, and I joined slightly later last year, and so it feels like it's growing exponentially. So they did quite a few rides and social events last year, but we've been planning a huge amount of events and have already started them this year. And the Facebook page is like, feels like it's sort of growing a huge amount, and still into an amount that we can manage. There used to be just 2 people on the sort of planning group, but now there's sort of 8 or so of us. And I think people are really excited. I recently joined another queer Facebook group along Aotearoa where people are just so hungry for community groups, and someone who wasn't me mentioned different spokes, and I was really excited about that. But it feels like people are really hungry to connect with people and to connect with people locally. And so it's really exciting that different spokes can be there. And I also think it's really special that it's a space that is sort of really rainbow friendly, but in an area that has not necessarily been associated with the rainbow community in the past. Like, I'm very integrated into the arts community, and it's so refreshing, I guess, showing the world that it's, you don't have to be like into arts to be queer, for example. I guess just validating queer people across all communities and valuing intersectionality.
Oh, kia ora. Thank you for that, Bethany. And it's really nice to have you and Amy here to speak from your perspectives, because I'm doing a degree in planning at the moment, and we are lucky enough to be able to read lots of urban design perspectives from like feminist urbanist theory and queer urban theory, and it's crazy to learn about the history of our cities being planned by straight white men, white able-bodied men. No offense, Sean. No, hopefully none taken. So I just wondered if we have any more questions for our awesome submitters today, and if not, I guess we will leave you to have a really nice afternoon. Cool. That might be us.
Cheers, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.
None taken.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate being able to be part of this.
Thank you.
No worries. Please come back and talk to us again.
Certainly will.
Awesome. So yeah, I think that's us. I think we're just jumping back on the main room, and is it in 10 minutes, Damien?